Hey guys, welcome everybody. Thanks to everybody out there and on Facebook Live and on Instagram that's viewing this for joining us. This is our first video within our training month here, all in the month of March. We're doing every day at 3 p.m. different training topics, everything from technical stuff to windshield repair, headlight restoration, scratch removal, business tips, marketing tips, etc. So today's topic is going to be how you can fill tight brakes. But before we jump into that topic, I want to introduce everybody to Jackson. Hey Jackson, how you doing, man?
Hey, good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So Jackson, tell us a little bit about yourself. Since you're relatively new to Glasswell, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Shiloh. Hello, everyone. My name's Jackson. I am the Western State Account Manager, the new guy around Glasswell, as well as new to the glass industry, all aspects of the glass industry. So I'm excited to get going. I'm originally from the East Coast, moved out to Bend, Oregon about 2.5 years ago, and thought there was no better place, to be honest with you. It's an amazing spot. If you guys have never been here, you got to check it out. Come by and say hello. But yeah, just enjoying my time so far at Glasswell. Just the community here is not only in the glass industry, but the community here at Glasswell. It's nice and tight knit. It's a small company that has worldwide reaches. So yeah, no, it's been an awesome start so far, and I'm looking forward to learning more and being with the team long term.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to have you, man. And you're doing a great job. So, to, just a quick question for you. What have you enjoyed most about the industry so far since you're new to it?
Yeah, probably so far is everybody's willing to teach. There's no attitude adjustment needed. There's no I'm too good for everybody else type mentality. So coming into the industry, that is something that I've loved, to be honest with you. Everyone lets you know how long they've been doing it, and also, hey, if you ever need a call, or like I'll drop everything that I'm doing and I'll answer your questions. There's no dumb questions. So starting off new in the industry, that's huge for me. That's something that I've really enjoyed being around.
Awesome. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing, man. So obviously, Jackson, as an account manager, you talk to a lot of customers. You talk to a lot of newer techs as well as pretty experienced techs. So I'm sure you're hearing questions and comments all across the gamut. Um,
Definitely.
what are some of the questions you run into when it comes to filling tight brakes?
Yeah, absolutely. That's for the most part. I'm talking to techs. I'm talking to, whether it be a mobile technician or somebody that has their own shop. Um, it seems like a lot of people are running into the tight brakes pretty often, and what can be done, honestly. Um, I guess they just are interested where to start, what the best place. They come up to a mobile windshield repair or something that's not necessarily the greatest setting. But what would you say is a good place to start?
Yeah, awesome. That's a good question because really tackling tight brakes it starts really before you even begin to do the work, right? So we'll go through a couple of things. I'd say the first thing is just learning the characteristics of what a tight brake looks like. If you're new to the industry, I mean, if you're a long time repair tech, you already know. But for those of you who are newer, and there's lots of you out there, what you're looking for. Anytime you see a brake with a very little cone in the middle. We've got an example right here. This one's sort of what I would describe as such. Now you can tell this one down here has got way more of an open center. But when you get one more like this, and I know it's hard to tell on an iPad camera, but you can see there's a lot of legs radiating. This one does have a little bit of space in the middle, but anytime you get a star brake that has very little space inside that cone, right underneath the impact point, that's generally going to be the type of repair that can give you trouble. Also, if you see a combination brake that has a leg and then another leg branching off of it, so learning to identify that type of repair first off is the first thing. Because when you see them, there's some things you can do before you even start your repair that will pay dividends as you start to work. So just to walk you through some of those things, the one thing I would always do when I come up to a really any repair, but especially a repair that has sort of a tight structure to it, is take my probe, and I always do some pre-flexing. And with that, and you can be reasonably aggressive with that. You know, put the pressure of like you're pressing hard on a elevator button, and you're working your way around sort of like the impact point, kind of pressing around the entire area. You know, see how I kind of do that, working clockwise or counterclockwise. And you'll see the legs kind of moving, because what that's doing is that if there are any legs that are sort of closed off or legs that aren't fully connected, what we want to do is connect them before we start the repair. It's a lot harder to do that once you started the repair, because you can't really access it as much. So your focus, you're flexing sort of right around the impact point. You can come out on the legs a little bit, but really that's not going to help you as much as it is just focusing pressure right around the impact point. Now, if it's a really hot day, you got to be careful with how much pressure you're applying. But that's the technique. That's what we call pre-flexing. The other thing you can do that I would even recommend is, it's even a good idea to do this sometimes from the inside the glass. You can always come inside the glass and pre-flex a little bit in the same manner from the inside. Because sometimes, you know, with rock chips, they're all different, right? So every leg is different, and the way that the glass breaks can pinch it in a way that maybe it opens up with pressure from the inside, and it won't open up with pressure from the outside.
I didn't even think about that.
So if you take 15, 20 seconds before you start a repair and just do that, just a little flex around the edges or around the impact point from the inside and the outside, it will pay off as you start your repair. It'll make it easier to fill. I think the other thing to do before you actually start your repair is just to make sure that we're not taking for granted the step of essentially probing out or removing any loose glass. Sometimes you'll see an impact point that looks like it's pretty open, but until you take a probe to it and sort of fish in there a little bit, as I'm doing right there, you know, taking the probe and kind of working in that area, sometimes you get a chunk of glass that'll pop out. So you can imagine if you got a little chunk of glass right there and it's blocking the resin from flowing into one of these tight radials, then we potentially have a problem, right? That we may not realize until we get started in the repair. So, you know, just make sure that you're cleaning out the impact point. A lot of rooks is probably not the right word, but new technicians.
That's me.
You worry about like being too aggressive with your probe, but really you don't have to worry about that. Just take the probe. You know, really work right into the impact point. Put some pressure on it, because you want to just basically chip out anything that's left in there. The chance of spreading a break directly from the impact point is slim to none. So using that probe is a good one. I think the other thing before you start repair. Sorry, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to ask. You know, clearing that glass away, that probably definitely impacts the vacuum. You know, the Zoom vacuum's one of the highest vacuums on the market, right? And so when you're clearing that initial glass away, does that have any impact on the vacuum?
Yeah, it's a good point, because again, with this type of break where you've got radials coming all the way around, you know, you're not feeding into one cone or pulling out of one cone that is connected to all the legs necessarily. In many cases, with a repair like this, you've got to be able to be pulling air out of all of those legs individually, since they're not necessarily funneling into one spot. So good point there. Removing that glass benefits you both on the injection and on the vacuum. And while you're on that point, I think another thing just to highlight before you start your repair, I mean, this may sound obvious to those of you who've been doing repairs for some time, but before I start every repair, I do one quick thing. As I walk up to the car, I'm doing this. I'm pulling my vacuum back just halfway, just to make sure I've got good suction. If you start the repair and you don't have a vacuum, that's a pain in the butt to have to pull it off and like either clean your seals or put new seals on. So just make sure you got a good vacuum before you get started, and that will also help to avoid problems with filling a break. Because believe it or not, with the ProVac, with the Zoom, because of the amount of vacuum that it creates, when you go to inject resin, if you have a good vacuum, it almost pulls the resin into the void. Whereas if you don't have that, what you're essentially doing is trying to force it in mechanically, which is just, you know, it's if you're forcing it in mechanically with sort of the pull, then it's going to go in more readily. So that's where the vacuum comes in. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing before you start a repair is just checking the temperature. You know, For those of you who live back east or in the north, we have a lot of cold weather. Cold weather can definitely slow the fill of a repair like this. So understanding the temperature of the glass, and if you have a really cold windshield, excuse me, even in the spring, like sometimes it can be really cold in the mornings, get the ambient temperature up a little bit on the glass. And if you can get the ambient temperature up, then we're not talking dramatic here, but raising the temperature of the windshield, oftentimes by turning on the car, letting the defrost sort of warm up the vehicle, or just the heaters warm up the vehicle a little bit slowly. Just raising the temperature of the glass 5 or 10 degrees can really help the resin to flow too.
Okay.
So that's another sort of pre-tip. So a lot of these are things you learn over time, but if you're new to the industry, they could be things that you might be missing.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is just making sure you choose the right resin. Here at Glasswell, we just have two main viscosities. One is all weather and one is warm weather. But it's important to understand that all weather resin really is a very thin resin. I mean, if you were to compare it to some other manufacturers, which, Glasswell resin is about 34% stronger, it's approximately an 18 to 22 CPS. Every company measures CPS a little bit differently, but it's a thin resin. So all weather resin for us means anything below 85 degrees Fahrenheit is we're going to use that resin, but especially on tight brakes. So if I was doing a brake like this, even if it was 85 plus, I'd probably still choose my all weather resin because it's thin enough to help flow into that brake.
Those tight cracks, right? That thin resin is going to be better for those tight cracks, those leg cracks, right? If I'm hearing you correctly.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Once the
Okay.
resin can get in there, and a lot of times that's what happens too. You start with a repair where the resin will start to flow in, but it gets stuck, and it may be like a little twist in the leg or something. So we'll talk about that in a second. But
Yeah.
I think the last thing before you start is just understanding the proper expectations. We see it all the time with technicians that come in for hands-on training, which obviously we haven't been able to do for a while. Hopefully, we will be able to very, very soon. Um, is that they have an expectation when they first start repairing that during the repair process that all the legs are going to completely disappear from every angle, and that's just not the case. What you want is the legs to disappear from all angles except for one. So for new techs, it's important to just understand what to look for. Put your eye on one leg. Once you think it's filled, then move around the repair, your head around the repair, and if you can see it only from one angle, then it's filled. And once you cure that leg is going to look better than what it does. When you're looking at it through a mirror with 10 times
Right.
magnification and the sun shining. So that's an important thing too, just to have the right expectation. You want the legs to be filled. You don't necessarily need them to disappear before you cure.
Okay. Okay. And I think that speaks to it, right? So just because you can see the leg doesn't necessarily mean that it's not filled with resin. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
You're
All
always going
right.
to see it
Cool.
from one angle.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Okay. Sweet. So it seems like we've gone over like the before checklist of you're approaching a kind of a tight break or a little bit of a complex break. What's the next step? I guess what should a tech do to start their repair?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now we're jumping into the repair side. I mean, the first thing that I see a lot with sometimes with newer techs is that they'll forget to use one of these. This is a unique product that Glasswell makes, the UV shell. But whether
Yeah.
it's this or whether it's a traditional UV blocker, um, if you're having trouble filling tight brakes and you're working outside, it's obviously UV is your enemy there. So if you start getting resin flowing into a tight brake, but it starts coagulating or thickening up before it can flow into the ends of the brake, then you're dead in the water before you even start. So that's the first thing. I mean, that may sound obvious, but always, 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 as soon as you start a complex repair, when you're working outside, put your UV blocker on. Even if you're in a somewhat shady environment, it's still a good idea. Put your UV blocker on and be ready to have your UV blocker on as soon as you load up your injector. The other thing here, I'll actually go ahead and just like kind of start loading one here so we can actually show you some
Yeah.
hands-on
Definitely.
stuff. So
Definitely.
I'll put my injector on here now. You notice too, if you can probably see in the camera here, see that squishy stuff? So you can tell I've got some injector seal lube, or I'm sorry, suction cup sealant on there, and there's a reason for that. I'll explain in a minute. So let me kind of go through my checklist here. I'll load up some resin. Probably one of the first things I'll mention too on this part too is we talked about the importance of choosing the right resin. Oops, there goes my seal. You techs have, I'm sure, experienced that before. The other thing too is just making sure that with a repair like this, you use enough resin because you got a lot of radials. There's a lot of places for the resin to flow.
Oh, okay.
So if you use 3 or 4 drops, the odds are you're going to bottom out and you're not going to have enough resin pressure to put enough pressure behind that resin to keep flowing.
Okay.
So
Hey, not to go back, Shiloh, sorry to interrupt, but not to go back, when you're with the UV blocker, is that necessarily, cold and warm temperature? Or can, that UV blocker be used north, south, east, west type of deal?
yeah, it doesn't matter the temperature. And
Perfect.
UV intensity really has very little to do with temperature. You can have a bitterly cold day that's a bluebird day and you're going to get premature curing.
Okay.
So definitely. Yeah, and so now I've loaded in my injector, trying to figure out where the camera is here. I've loaded in maybe 6 or 7 drops in this one, just because I know I've got a pretty good sized break. And this thing's probably about the size of a quarter. It's got lots of radials. So, just typical stuff. I'm gonna bring my resin up to the bottom of the seal. Right there. Okay. And then we're just gonna go ahead and ratchet it in. Okay, so notice how, first off, I can slide this around. So with this type of break, one thing I want to highlight right here, this is one of the areas where you can mess up, especially on this type of a break, where you can affect your ability to fill. The seal just touched the glass right there. All that I need is 1 click. That's it. All I need, 1 click. If I do 2 or 3 on this type of break, I risk closing up that center because there's very little cone there, right? We talked about there's very little cone in the middle with this type of break. It's super tight. So if I put 2, 3 clicks there, what I'm doing is I'm closing that off.
Okay.
And then the resin can't flow effectively. So that's the first thing, is go easy with the pressure. It benefits you in a couple of ways, but especially on this type of break. On a big bullseye, a big combo break, you can do 2, 3 clicks and it's probably not going to impact you much. But just 1 click is fine. So 1 click, that'll prevent you from being too tight. Bill Lambeth said it, so that's the first thing. Okay, now the other thing is too here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and pull my vacuum, and I'll talk more as I go here. But the other thing here is that we want to make sure that the injector is located correctly on the impact point. So if we're over an impact, if with this type of break in particular, it's really easy to like sort of pinch it off, and sometimes you have to experiment a little bit because even with a light with 1 click, you might be closing off a leg. So you can always shift the location. You always want to start directly over the repair, but it's a good idea to have some lube on there so you can adjust it. So I'm gonna go ahead and start injecting resin.
Okay.
Now the other thing is at this point I want to just highlight here too. This was on our list of things. So if you notice here, I've flared out the seal pretty good. Like you want the seal pretty well flared. So on this type of break in particular, if you don't have enough resin in there, and you can't fully flare out that seal, or you get down to the bottom and you can bottom out the injector, where there's no more space to twist it, then you're not creating enough resin pressure to help the resin really push past those tight legs.
Okay.
So that's where that extra 2 to 3 drops of resin really comes in handy with this type of break. Now you can see this break is already starting to fill. I'm not really doing anything yet, but let me talk you through some of the techniques. Some of this is basic, some is going to be a little bit more advanced. And there's several different ways to help speed up a tight break fill, as well as to aid if you have a stubborn leg. So the first one, tried and true method is just taking a probe. Hopefully you guys can see this here. And, probing out a leg. See if I can bring it over here a little bit better. Try to focus it. So I don't know if you can see that very well. It's kind of fuzzy, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy, but I think you're right on the crack right now, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. So all I'm doing, and if you're not familiar with the probing technique, what I'm doing is I'm putting a small amount of pressure at the base of each leg. So you're not going out here at the end of the leg. You're doing it sort of at the base of the leg. And the idea there is you're just opening up the leg to help the resin get past it. You don't necessarily have to wait until the resin is flowed all the way to the end, but doing this oftentimes helps the resin get past a tight section, and then that's where the wetting properties of the resin take over, right? And then the resin will naturally continue to flow. So oftentimes you'll notice that after you let go, a leg that you were working on starts to fill. So flexing is one really key one. I'm sure you guys have seen in many of our videos that we also recommend a cork. The cork sort of has a different technique. It's not so much about flexing one leg, but it's sort of creating a pumping action and sort of a vibration. Again, the idea there is just to help the resin get past a tight spot, and then usually it'll continue to work. So the technique there is you just grab a cork. I'm going to try to swing around behind here if I can. And I'm just going to, right behind that impact point, right behind that repair, massage it a little bit. Maybe 15 seconds or so with medium pressure. And what I'm doing now is I'm flexing the legs. It's not creating almost any heat, so there's just very, very lightly warm. Just a little bit of corking. You don't want to get too crazy with it, but that can help the resin to get flowing. I'm just going to move this back to the right spot. Okay, so there's tip number 2. So flexing, corking, and then one other technique that Bill just mentioned that's one of my favorites. So for those of you who have the new multi-purpose tool from Glasswell that came out about 6 months ago, it can be used for drilling, awesome for pit polishing, and this same cork head that's on it is fantastic for working on tight breaks. And I'll show you just really quickly how to do that. My space is kind of confined, so we'll do our best. You just put it on, it's got 3, let me find the camera, 3 adjustments, so put it on like maybe 2, and then we're just going to run the cork right over the back of that repair. And I might have to lift this up a tad bit just to make some room. And you just essentially run it really flat. You don't need to run it up on an edge. And you just run it up back and forth, up and down a leg that's stubborn. And again, it's creating almost no heat, but what it is doing is creating some vibration.
Ah, okay.
And the vibration will help the resin to flow.
Okay.
So super easy. You can also ramp up the speed on that. You can also use these right up under a brake if you want, but the problem there is that you'll end up chewing up the cork. So those are some really simple methods. You can see just doing those few things actually help this repair almost completely fill. Now, obviously we're in a controlled environment, but using those tips will really help. And again, this is a really simple little attachment that comes with the tool. You get 2 of them with the tool. So a lot of techs keep one of these already set for essentially helping to fill breaks, and then they can use the same tip for the pit polishing at the end. Okay, we talked about flaring out the seal, making sure you got plenty of resin pressure. I think that's about it as far as doing a normal repair, as far as how to manage dealing with tight breaks.
Yeah, man, that's the first time I've seen the cork on the drill trick. That's an awesome trick. Definitely gonna recommend that to techs. Okay, so that one filled pretty well. I'm not gonna lie, that one looks really good. What are some things? The legs still won't fill, maybe. You just got like a troublesome leg there. Unlike this one, because that one filled really well. What can we do there if there's something a little bit more intense?
Yeah. Okay. So we've to your point, like there's going to be oddball situations, and I think the first thing probably to try, back off a little bit of your resin pressure, so you don't want to be flared out completely. The first thing to try is just adjust the pressure of the injector on the glass. If it's not filling, you can try to either lift it up and give yourself one less click, and then try again, just run a quick vacuum and a quick pressure. Or, you can even try a second click. So either more pressure or less. Usually I would err on the side of less pressure. Maybe you need to come off a click because it could just be that you're pinching. The second most common sort of troubleshooting tip is that you're located. So you're right. Let's say you're right on the impact point, but what could very well be happening, especially with a very tight break with lots of radials, is that just based on where you're sitting on the impact point, even just the tiniest amount of injector pressure is closing off one leg in particular. So what's happening there is that essentially no matter what you're doing, you're probably just not able to get into that spot. So essentially all you need to do is to, again, just go neutral on your resin pressure. So just kind of like not flared out. And then if you've got the lube on your cups, you can just slide it. Then it'll slide it over to the left or the right. You might lose a little bit of resin. It's not a big deal. At that point, that's also why you want to have an extra couple drops, because on a big repair like that, you can run into that kind of situation. So maybe you go left or right on the impact point slightly. So
Okay.
picture that the center of that seal is maybe not dead center now. It's slightly off one side. But by doing that, you've alleviated a pinch on the opposite side that allows the resin to flow more readily. So pressure and then location, we're talking about micro movements, like a couple millimeters to the left or the right or up or down can make the world of difference as far as allowing the resin to flow. Okay, so that's another one. And then the last one is, is drilling, and I know you probably hear from a lot of people about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you want to talk about drilling for a minute, maybe kind of while we're on the topic?
Yeah, no, a lot of people seem to, well, I guess they're not sure of when to drill and when to not drill. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and he's been doing it forever, right? And he's kind of tried to go away from drilling, but something that he always
Hey guys, well, I think we had like a little bit of an internet issue there, so I'll go ahead and finish up. I think I was able to get back on here. He just was talking about drilling, so I'll just quickly highlight. So one of the misconceptions is that here at Glasswell we don't believe you should ever drill. The reality is that what we try to teach people is that drilling is an advanced technique that you can learn over time, and as you increase your skills, you'll find times where you will want to drill a repair, but it's pretty rare. And so what we like to do is to encourage people with the right tools, the right training. You can very easily start doing all kinds of repairs without drilling. So learn to do repairs without drilling, because what often happens is that drilling becomes a shortcut essentially. So, but let me talk to you about some areas now. Once you've got some experience and you've been doing lots of repairs, let me talk to you about some areas and some techniques you can use for drilling. And I'm just loading in a drill bit here real quick so I can show you. Oh, there he is.
Sorry about that.
Hey, Jackson. We don't have your audio, so I'll let you work on that and I'll just keep rolling. So when and if you need to drill, if you get into a really stubborn repair or one of these breaks, and as you get more advanced in your skill set, you can learn to drill. Now, what you don't want to do with a drill is shortcut it. So the proper technique with drilling is to sort of work out the impact point, sort of drill out the area of the impact point, rather than drilling directly into the glass. So you're trying to create a more of a natural looking pit that opens up the repair so that as you go a little bit deeper, yes, it's narrowing down a little bit. What you'll see with a lot of new technicians who just learn to drill as a first resort is they take a drill bit and they go zip right through the middle of the repair, and it creates this very artificial, very visible, oftentimes dangerous technique that can either run on you or the drill can run on you, etc. So what we would teach, and we can do another series on this in the future, is that when you do drill, that you want to do it in a way that is more natural. I'm trying to get this drill bit in here, but I can't seem to do two things at once. I don't apparently have that capacity. Let me get it in here so I can show you guys. Oh, I've got the wrong size column. That's why. So anyway, so when you're using the drill, let's say my fingertip is the is the brake. You know, you instead of coming straight at it and going zzz, right into the middle and creating a hole, you're going to want to like kind of come around the impact point like so, sort of work out that loose glass, and then as you come in the middle, go a little bit deeper. So you're creating sort of a natural cone that gets a little bit deeper and a little bit narrow as you get in. And then once you get into the middle, you just pull out. You don't need much. But again, drilling is the type of thing that ideally you add to your skill set over time, but isn't absolutely necessary. I would say, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and the amount of repairs that I ran into, and just for those of you who don't know, prior to working for Glasswell, I actually ran my own business doing glass repair. And I would say it was a handful of repairs in several years that I felt like I actually had to drill. Now, there were repairs I could have drilled, but that I actually needed to drill was very few. So it's a valuable technique to understand, but it's not a core one to get started. It's something you kind of add to your skill set as you grow.
Perfect. Cool. Can you hear me now?
I don't think we're able to hear you.
Still nothing.
Jackson probably just got the audio issues there. I know we're sorry, everybody, for the technical issues. You probably just had too many things going at once, and the whole world seems to be on the internet today. But I want to thank Jackson so much for being having an awesome interchange here. All the great questions, great comments, and I'm just going to tease up real quick here before we finish up. Thanks to everybody for your comments. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you all back in the rest of the week. And we're going to be doing tomorrow some live headlight restoration application of coating a headlight. So we're going to do probably some of the same steps, and then show you how to coat, and hopefully that's it. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Shiloh.